about Proverbs for the good life. As we're thinking about just the overall scope of Proverbs, a lot of different instructions, a lot of different things about life. I have 7 rules that I want to go through today from the book of Proverbs. Obviously, we can't talk about everything in Proverbs in one day, 31 chapters. There's a ton of stuff in there. But I've got 7 really big, high-level categories of instruction in Proverbs for how to live a life that is good. And we talked last week on Sunday night, sort of introducing the wisdom literature. The question is, how do I not be simple? Simple in the wisdom literature of the Bible, simple is a synonym for somebody who is dumb, who doesn't live a good life, somebody who just sort of does whatever comes to mind, or they believe whatever anybody says. But to be more discerning, to have a life that is good and righteous, something that is more enjoyable, has better relationships. That's what we're going to talk about this morning. The first 2, self-control and humility, learn self-control and be humble, are foundational adjustments. These are foundational attitude adjustments from which all of the rest of them will flow. Everything comes from self-control and humility. If you can't learn self-control and humility, you're not going to be able to do the rest. Fundamentally, you won't be able to. These are the first 2 pillars of the good life in Proverbs. Learn self-control and be humble. We're going to go, as we talk about self-control, a wide gamut. Self-control sexually, self-control emotionally, self-control in our money, self-control in our attitudes. 5:20, why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman and embrace the bosom of an adulteress? For a man's ways are before the eyes of the Lord. He ponders all his paths. The iniquity of the wicked ensnares him, and he is held fast by the cords of sin. He dies for lack of discipline. And because of his great folly, he is led astray. The word discipline in the Bible, of course, has 2 meanings. Discipline externally, that is, we discipline our children, but there's also the internal sense of discipline, that I am developing discipline in this context, discipline in my marriage, discipline in my passions, that I'm not led astray into death. Now, in Proverbs, in Solomon's formulation of a lot of these things, he's thinking about probably physical death. Of course, for us, we're thinking about spiritual death, eternal separation from God, if we cannot learn to have discipline. 14:29, whoever is slow to anger has great understanding, but he who has a hasty temper exalts folly. Says very similar thing in 16:32, whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit. This is a poetic way of describing self-control. He who can rule his spirit is better than he who takes a city. He's using the analogy of internal strength versus external strength, right? The mighty warrior, he who takes a city, great external, outward signs of strength. But Proverbs is saying he who has that internal strength, who can be slow to anger, who can rule his spirit, has more strength, is better than those who have this external show of strength. 20 verse 1. Wine is a mocker, strong drink a brawler. Whoever is led astray by it is not wise. Here, self-control in what we ingest and how we interact with substances in the world. Here, wine, alcohol, loss of self-control. That's really what we're driving at in really the whole biblical prohibition or instruction about strong drink, is you've got to remain in control. Remain in control and do not be led astray by, it doesn't just have to be alcohol, but by substances. By ingesting substances, you need to remain in control. Proverbs 21:17, whoever loves pleasure will be a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. This is just the passions and pleasures of life. Could be sexual pleasure, but doesn't have to be. Could be any number of pleasures. Are you in control of your desires, the desires of the flesh? And the instruction here, if you can't control yourself, that will lead you into poverty. You'll spend all your money on that stuff instead of what you should be spending money on. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. Here, self-control with money. Are you disciplined in how you spend money, how you think about money? Because, of course, the borrower is the slave to the lender. If we're undisciplined, uncontrolled with our money, that's going to lead us into a lot of compromising situations, a lot of difficult situations. 25, 27, and 28, it's not good to eat much honey, nor is it glorious to seek one's own glory. A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. The analogy of self-control to the walls of a city. Protection in life. You want to live the good life? You want to have an enjoyable time in this life? You need the walls of self-control. Self-discipline will keep your life on the right track. Most of the rules that we'll talk about in the second section of this sermon are extensions of self-control, applications of self-control in our lives. The second high-level rule, be humble. 11:2, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble is wisdom. A real common idea in Proverbs is that pride leads to destruction. 16, 18, and 19, I should have put these in a different order. Pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Probably the most famous version of this proverb, but there are several of them. I'm just picking a couple. It is better to be of lowly spirit with the poor than divide the spoil with the proud. Humility and pride will affect who we associate with. It'll affect the relationships that we have. If you're all about your own glory and your own pride and looking good, well, that will affect who you associate with. Not in a good way, right? If all you care about is your own glory. 15:31, the ear that listens to life-giving reproof will dwell among the wise. Whoever ignores instruction despises himself, but he who listens to reproof gains intelligence. The fear of the Lord is instruction and wisdom, and humility comes before honor. The first part of this in 31, listening to reproof, listening to instruction, that requires humility. It requires the attitude, I probably don't know everything. There's probably things that I need instruction and discipline and reproof on, and if I cannot listen to reproof and instruction, I despise myself. That's just hurting myself. I'm not hurting you. I'm hurting myself because I'm not willing to listen and be corrected. 24:17, do not rejoice when your enemy falls. Let not your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and be displeased and turn his anger away from him. There's an element of pride in rejoicing over the fall of your enemy. I'm so much better. Look at what happened to that guy. The Proverbs say don't do that. Don't have that attitude. God doesn't like that attitude. And if you're rejoicing over the fall of your enemy, the anger of the Lord may very well turn from your enemy to you because you have this haughty, arrogant attitude. 26:12, do you see a man who is wise in his own eyes? There's more hope for a fool. Well, again, in the words of Proverbs, the simpleton. There's more hope for a simpleton than somebody who's wise in his own eyes. Be humble. Lower yourself. Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what tomorrow may bring. The pride of thinking you know the future, James says it this way, right? Come those who boast about today, tomorrow we're going to go to this town and make this much profit. You don't know. Your life is but a vapor. We'll talk about that a lot with Ecclesiastes. What isn't covered by self-control, and we're thinking about, again, high-level attitudes in Proverbs. What isn't covered by self-control is covered by humility. From these two attitudes flow righteous behavior in Proverbs. And so the second section is 4 categories. Again, if you're trying to break up and divide Proverbs into different categories, you could be a lot more granular. You could have dozens and dozens of categories. These are very high level, very broad categories, but cover a lot of what God is looking for in righteous behavior. You want to have a good life? These are some things you need to learn to do. Work hard. Be intentional about your relationships. Be careful with your words. And treat those, I've got beneath you in quotes, that's important. Treat those beneath you well. These, again, 4 broad categories that cover a lot of what God is looking for in righteous behavior and that will affect a large portion of your life as you're thinking about, again, how is my life good? Is it enjoyable? Am I satisfied? Do I have purpose? Do I have fulfillment? Well, do you do these kinds of things? And if the answer is no, then you're probably not going to have a very satisfied and fulfilling life. Number 3, work hard. A lot of the Proverbs have to do with the importance of diligence and hard work. Proverbs 6:6. Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in the summer, she gathers food in the harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. There's an element of being a self-starter, isn't there? No chief, no officer, no ruler. Just does what needs to be done. Does what is important in life. Has a diligent work ethic, and in the analogy, the avoidance of poverty and want. Because if you just laze about, you're not going to have what you need in life. Proverbs 21:25, the desire of the sluggard kills him, for his hands refuse to labor. All day long he craves and craves, but the righteous gives and does not hold back. It's an interesting tension in 26, the contrast. He craves and craves, but the contrast is not to the righteous who gets what he wants. The contrast is to the righteous who has worked hard enough to have extra, who has worked hard enough to be able to give and not hold back, because he isn't lacking. He has what he needs and more than he needs so that he can be generous, versus the sluggard who doesn't have anything to give and just craves and craves. He's not willing to do any work to achieve what he wants. Proverbs 12:24, the hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor. We don't have a lot of forced labor in this country. Thank God for that. But you will have to do things you don't like if you're not diligent. Right? If you're not working hard and diligent in your working, you're going to be forced into some situations in life that you would rather not be in. Proverbs 13, the soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. 19:15, slothfulness casts into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger. 21:5, the plans of the diligent surely lead to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes to poverty. The getting of treasure by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor and a snare of death. You might think, well, how can I circumvent this hard work? I know, I'm going to lie my way into treasure. Right? Isn't it really what we do, is we want to circumvent the hard work, and so we figure out other ways to acquire? Proverbs is saying the treasures acquired by a lying tongue, fleeting vapor. They won't last. They're a snare of death. They will not lead you to where you want to go. Number 4, be intentional about relationships. And this is really twofold. First of all, it is important to be selective in your friendships. 14:7, leave the presence of a fool, for there you do not meet words of knowledge. 18:24, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. It's not about having an abundance of relationships. It's about having good relationships, right? It's not just about knowing all the people, but do you have a few close, good friends who will stick to you closer than a brother? 23:19 through 21. Hear, my son, and be wise. Direct your heart in the way. Be not among drunkards or gluttonous eaters of meat, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and slumber will clothe them with rags. Again, it's thinking about, who are you associating with? Who do you spend time with? Do you spend time with the foolish? Well, you're probably going to become a fool. Do you spend time with the drunkard and the glutton? Well, you're probably going to become that and have the same poverty that they have. It's not about having a lot of friendships. It's about having close, good friendships. Now, does this mean that we never spend time with people outside the church? Of course not. Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians 5, right? I don't mean don't associate with people of this world. We need to associate with those outside the church. But your closest relationships should be with people who will help you be wise in the ways of God, who will help you be closer to God and what he wants us to be. We also need to have relationships. We need to be selective, but we can't totally isolate ourselves. 18:1, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. 27:17, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. We are selective in our relationships, but we do need to have them. We can't just be isolated. We need to be developing close relationships so that we break out against this idea of breaking out against sound judgment. I need you to help me have sound judgment. I need you to be able to correct and discipline. It goes back to humility, right? Whoever won't listen to reproof. A lot of times we don't make relationships because we don't want anybody to tell us to do anything different. Well, you're seeking your own desire, not God's. I need other people to sharpen me into what God wants me to be. Number 5, Be careful about your words. A lot of instruction in Proverbs about words. 6:16 through 19, this is a list of things that God hates, and I would suggest that 3 of them have to do with our words. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. Of the 7 things, now obviously God hates more than this, but of the 7 things listed here, 3, almost half, have to do with what we say, our words. God cares a lot about our words. Proverbs 10:18. The one who conceals hatred has lying lips. Whoever utters slanders is a fool. When words are many, transgression is not lacking. But whoever restrains his lips is prudent. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The heart of the wicked is of little worth. And why is he equating the tongue to the heart? The tongue of the righteous versus the heart of the wicked, because Jesus says, right, out of the treasure of the heart, the mouth speaks. So the tongue of the righteous is choice silver, but the heart of the wicked is of little worth. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of sense. There's a couple of different elements to this section of Proverbs. When words are many, transgression is not lacking. We need to learn to be controlled and not say so much stuff. Ironic, given that I'm going to talk for 30 minutes. Versus those who are prudent, who restrain their lips. But also, what you say reflects who you are. What you say reflects what's in your heart. So as we're being careful with our words, that's not just being careful with our words to lie. That's being careful with our words and guarding what's in our heart, guarding what comes into my mind and into my soul. Proverbs 11:12 through 13. Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding remains silent. You don't need to say everything you know. And even if it might be true, there's a lot of wisdom in remaining silent. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. If somebody tells you something in confidence, keep it covered. Keep it locked down. Don't go about spreading and slandering and saying things. And even when you see things that are not good, you don't necessarily need to say it all the time. Remain silent. Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. He opens wide his lips comes to ruin. Same idea in 17. Whoever restrains his word had knowledge. He who has a cool spirit is a man of understanding. Isn't this an extension of self-control? To be self-controlled, to learn restraint. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. If you want to appear smart, shut your mouth. Be quiet, right? You don't need to open your mouth and then reveal all of your ignorance. We need to learn to be careful and control our words. Number 6, treat those, and again I will note the quotes around beneath, treat those beneath you well. Even animals. 12:10, whoever is righteous has regard for the life of his beast, but the mercy of the wicked is cruel. Not just animals, but those who are beneath you in human society. 22, do not rob the poor because he is poor, or crush the afflicted at the gate, for the Lord will plead their cause and rob of life those who rob them. Solomon, of course, is probably thinking about this again physically, but we, of course, think about this in eternity. Spiritually, if you're going to crush and oppress the afflicted at the gate, God will crush and oppress you in eternity. Proverbs 31:8, open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Not just don't treat them badly, but actively treat them well. Actively do what's good for those who are disadvantaged. And again, just like a lot of the things we've talked about have been extensions of self-control, this is an extension of humility, of thinking about ourselves with the right evaluation. It comes from recognition of value among those whom God has created. One of the words that comes up a lot in Proverbs is the maker, his maker. The Proverbs use this quite a bit. Whoever oppresses a poor man insults his maker. Insults his maker being whose? The maker of the poor man. You oppress the poor man, you're insulting the one who made the poor man. But he who is generous to the needy honors who? Honors his maker. 17:5, whoever mocks the poor insults his maker. He who is glad a calamity will not go unpunished. 19:17, whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed. The rich and the poor meet together. The Lord is the maker of them all. This is why beneath is in quotes. No one is really beneath you. We all have equal standing in eternity. The Lord is the maker of them all. There are people in life that fall into bad situations. Maybe they're born into bad situations, or even through their own poor choices end up in bad situations. That doesn't make you better than them. That doesn't make you superior to them. Be careful, especially how you treat those that you might consider beneath you. Even that language, that attitude, you're beneath me, betrays that you don't really get how God thinks about people. You don't really understand how God thinks about his creation. Everyone is worthy of being treated well. Number 7, the last of our rules for the good life, the summation really of it all. We talked about it at length last Sunday night, the beginning of wisdom. Trust in the Lord more than anything else. And that includes, yes, more than yourself, more than your friends, more than the news, more than your mentors, more than your whatever you want to put in there, your boss. Trust in the Lord more than anything else. Above all, Proverbs 3:5-8. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. The phrase that I hate the most, that's an overstatement. Shouldn't say that. One of the phrases I hate the most in modern culture is follow your heart. It is blatantly unbiblical. Don't follow your heart. Your heart is dumb. Your heart is deceitful above all things. In the words of the Bible, the heart is desperately sick. Trust in the Lord. Don't lean on your own understanding. Trust in him. In all your ways, acknowledge God. And what does that mean, in all my ways, acknowledge God? That when I'm thinking about, what do I do for work? When I'm thinking about, where will I live? When I'm thinking about, who will I marry? When I'm thinking about, who will I have friends? Or who will my friends be? When I'm thinking about, what will my hobbies be? How will I spend my time? In all your ways, are you thinking about how this relates to God? Are you thinking about what God would say about each choice that you're making? Now, obviously, we think about, say, our jobs. Thinking about, we're talking about graduation Sunday. I didn't plan this out at the beginning of the year. It just worked well. Talking to the graduates. I don't think there's one thing that God has. You need to do this. This is God's plan for your life. You need to be X, Y, or Z, an accountant or a whatever. But in your thinking about your job, is your job going to help you be closer to God? Is it going to help you be more generous? Is it going to help you have things that you can share with others? Is it going to require you to do things that God would not approve of? Is it going to require you to miss worship all the time? Like, these are things as we're thinking about our life choices. And again, job's one of them, spouse, friends, where to live, hobbies, all of them. Do you think about how that affects God in your relationship with him? Do you think about how these things affect your ability to be faithful to the Lord? Proverbs 16:2-5. All the ways of a man are pure in his own eyes. That's the default setting. The default setting is, I know what's best. It's going to be great if I do what I want. But the Lord weighs the spirit. Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. The Lord has made everything for its purpose, even the wicked for the day of trouble. I love demotivators. They're demotivation. You have motivational posters. Demotivators are like a dark twist on it. My favorite one is, maybe your life is supposed to be a warning to others, right? There is a purpose for everything. God has made even the wicked for the day of trouble. But it would be nice if my purpose was not to be an example of what not to be. It would be great if I was not the wicked made for the day of trouble. It would be great if I committed my work to the Lord so that he would establish my path. Everyone who is arrogant in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Be assured, he will not go unpunished. Now, maybe he will in this life. There's a lot of arrogant people. As we conclude this sermon, I want to remind everybody that Proverbs, the wisdom literature of the Bible, these are probabilities more than absolutes. These are generalities, because we do know a lot of arrogant people who they just seem to succeed at everything. They have good jobs, they have a lot of money, but they will be punished eventually. Maybe not in this life, but definitely in eternity. One of the things that Solomon really struggled with, again, we'll talk about next week in Ecclesiastes, Solomon didn't quite have that piece of the puzzle that we have. The secret thing that has been revealed to us in Jesus is God's plan for eternity. The Israelites didn't have that entire picture. We do. And so we understand that this life is not really what it's about. This life is not all there is. By percentage of your existence, this life is essentially zero. Any number over infinity is zero. That's just a mathematical rule. By percentage, this life of your existence is so minuscule, which is why we need to commit our ways to the Lord. Trust not in my own heart, leaning not on my own understanding, trusting that God knows best because God sees the whole picture. I see such a small slice of reality. God who knows everything. I appreciated Don's comments before worship this morning. God who has perfect, infinite, entire understanding. Don't you think he might know how to live a good life? Don't you think he might know what humans need to thrive and flourish? And so why would I lean on my own understanding? I see such a small percentage of reality. I'm going to lean on the understanding of the one who knows all things. As we conclude, we're going to offer the invitation, just a closer walk with thee. That's really what we've been talking about all throughout these rules for the good life, rules for having a closer walk with God, a life that is lived in the way that he wants us to live, that leads to the outcomes that he wants us to have. That's my hope for all of us, not just the graduates. We're thinking about the graduates today, but really for all of us, that we would have the good kind of life that God wants us to have if we live the kind of way that God wants us to live. And so we offer the invitation to have a closer walk with God, to have a closer walk with Jesus. Maybe you don't know where to begin. That's fine. Come talk to us. Maybe you do know where to begin. The beginning, to die to self, to turn from our old life, that's repentance, right? To confess Jesus, to be united with him in baptism. That's the beginning, but life continues on after that. Most of your Christian life will be beyond that, drawing closer to Jesus every day. Come while we stand and sing.